I have so many, special experiences as a fan, up to last year being in the Garden, because Fishes played at the Garden, a few years ago, they played 13 nights in a row at the Garden. Yeah. So to be in the audience, like with my hands over my head, looking up at the iconic roof, so to play on stage and sort of scan the audience, it was such a full circle experience to be there. So yeah, it's the world's greatest arena, and it's always really exciting. And it's bizarre to say always that I've done it more than once.
Yeah. With
this is All About the Song.
Welcome to the 120th episode of All About the Song. I am your host, Michael McDonnell, and thank you for joining us. On the podcast today, we have Dan Kanter, who is a guitar player residing out of Toronto, a musical director, a fantastic artist, a really great conversationalist. We had a really good time talking. Dan he is the musical director and former lead guitarist for Justin Bieber, and he's worked alongside many artists such as Ariana Grande, Stevie Wonder, Carlos Santana, Miley, Cyrus, Shawn, Mendes, Drake, and Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead. He has, what a musical career thus far. It was a really great opportunity to get to sit down with Dan and talk to him. I'd like to thank Danny Reiner for setting this up, but it was really wonderful and bittersweet we couldn't do it in person. Obviously, COVID-19 is ongoing, and so we are doing these episodes at home. But it was wonderful to talk to a guy like Dan. It was wonderful to geek out on guitars. Honestly, I'm ready to have another podcast again with him because I've thought of so many follow-up questions. Just even, sometimes you interview an artist and then you listen to what they say and you start looking for the things they talk about. And so I've done a couple deep dives on YouTube, just watching various things that he's been a part of. And we're going to show it in the B-roll, but I really wanted to let you all know that there's a fantastic performance of Dan with Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead. And it's just the two of them performing acoustic guitars together. The solos that Dan performs in these are just absolutely, they're so tasteful, so choice, so fantastic. But we do a really great deep dive on Dan, how he started, where he's gone, what he's up to, and I look forward to bringing you that conversation. And now a quick word from our friends and sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Hailed, which is a coffee shop located at Yonge and Gerrard in the downtown Toronto area. If you are a coffee drinker, you must try Hailed. They are ranked consistently among the top 10 coffee houses in Toronto. Visit the store and support local Toronto-based businesses. Be sure to place your order at www.hailed.ca. This episode is also brought to you by Flickly. Thank you, Richard Atkin, friend of the podcast. We really appreciate your support for the Canadian music scene. Rich is the founder and CEO of Flickly, a premier video animation studio, working with large brands and enterprises across the globe. Learn more about Rich and his work at Flickly by going to the website flickly.com, FLIKLI.com, and connect with Richard Atkin on LinkedIn. So here we are, episode 120 of All About the Song. Here is Dan Kanter. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Before anything, even for the audio listeners, I encourage you to check out the video of this episode because Dan, where you're recording from, it looks like you're in the back of a Guitar Center right now.
Yes, I'm in my studio in Toronto, and I don't know, that's my guitar wall. I've always dreamed of having one. There you go.
That's pretty awesome.
I use them all, which is I make an effort to use them all, but they're all like connected to like a memory. You know, I would get them for like a certain sound or a certain show. So they're all, I mean, they're all practical. They're not just there for eye candy. Yeah.
Was that okay when you started playing guitar? Was that, I find that a lot of musicians, myself included, before actually really being able to play, looking at guitar magazines and being enamored with gear is like so important and kind of like a first step. Were you a gearhead from the beginning?
Yeah, totally. Before I played, I was a gearhead. I come from a musical family, so there were instruments around. Yeah. But for sure, like I was and I'm still a fan. And I used, look at posters on my wall, and I really think the only reason I'm a Gibson guy, even though I play, Strats when I need them, is like my first hero was like Zakk Wylde.
Yeah.
And seeing him with his Les Paul and then Slash, So, I mean, I love Stevie Ray. If I saw him first, I don't know. I just like when I think of guitar, I picture Zakk and Slash playing a Les Paul. So,
Well, especially Zakk Wylde, he was so ingrained in the magazines, and he had the black and white guitar, and it was so iconic. And and he looks like such a badass too. Like everything about him looks amazing.
Yes, I agree. He's a rock god.
Yeah. So
essential.
Growing up in a musical family, was that something that you always, took to? Was it always something that you were interested in?
Yeah, totally. I was, my dad was like almost like the way that he encouraged me. He grew up in Brantford, Ontario, and he's like 10 years older than Gretzky. So he was like babysitting and on the rink with Gretzky when Gretzky was like 7,
wow.
Running circles through them. And my father also directs musical theater. So I was very much encouraged to like play in the NHL and listen to Phantom of the Opera at a young age. So hockey was really like my first dream. But very early on, like 6 or 7, I started taking classical piano. And then I got really into drums. My best friend was obsessed with Rush. So he became the drummer. Like I probably would have been a drummer.
Yeah.
I still play, but he was so into Rush. And, when I was getting into guitar, I mean, probably similar to a lot of us, like, or I'm close to our age, like it was so exciting as Nirvana was coming out and all these songs that I could learn immediately, right? Like the 90s rock songs, I could just get under my fingers. But my dad directed musical theater. So my whole life I grew up seeing him in rehearsals and going to his shows. And it really opened my eyes to not just the music, but the whole production of music, and going to concerts and really looking at the lights and the choreography. And especially obviously at his musicals and, like being there, like he didn't have a babysitter. So I would just sit in rehearsals and watch him, drive the ship and direct the rehearsals. And I really admired like being behind the scenes. So early on, I knew I didn't want to be, Axl Rose in the front. I like to be, either like the guitar player in a shadow or not on stage.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I find that when I first started playing music, the only things that I was aware of was the show. And when you start playing in bands, one of those things that you see after a while is, you add a couple lights on a stage and everyone thinks that you've, matured endlessly. But for you to be able to understand the purpose and the point and the fact that just because you have drums, bass, a guitar, and keyboards doesn't mean you got the whole package on stage, and that's not a show. And that's probably, that probably set you apart from a lot of your peers.
I mean, they made fun of me because I would say, let's add a hit here because there's going to be an explosion. And, my best friend would say, you idiot, we're playing like our high school cafeteria. Yeah. But I always thought of like set flow and, talking to our singer about speaking to the audience and, in between songs and when songs should flow into others, like just the whole narrative of a show. And that really came from my father's musicals for sure.
That's awesome. With growing up playing music, like with hockey, you're put in with your peers, like you're all of a sudden part of a group. With music, it's not so much, it's not the same regimentation where your parents are signing you up. Did you have a strong base of friends that kind of got into music at the same time as you?
Definitely. My best friend, Matt, who I was saying, who got into Rush and was obsessed with drums. He and we were like sleeping over in line for tickets at Ticketmaster and lining up to be on the barricade and watching every documentary. We were deep, the two of us. He was like my friend that we would like turn on Dark Side of the Moon in the dark and like, just rock out to it. For sure. So that was a big thing growing up with him.
I think it's important. It's not the most important, but if you have buddies that can push you along, it really helps. Like I had a group of friends, I still have a group of friends, and we all got into it and it just pushes you farther. But we found that particular in Guitar World magazines where they have like the tabs in the back. Yeah. We weren't good enough to be able to look at the magazine, read it, analyze it, and play it. So it was like three of us that would learn. And then the best guitar player would be the one that would be taught how to play it. And then he would teach the rest of us how to play, Jimmy Eat World song or like a Blink-182 song. Yeah, like just it. And I've said this so many times on the podcast. I think that the 90s guitar movement going into the 2000s, some of those riffs were almost tutorials for chords. Well, they absolutely were. Oh, yeah. I think that...
Completely. There are songs... Sorry, go ahead.
No. I think we got really lucky with the fact that pop music was teaching you if you wanted to learn.
Totally. A lot of songs like that come to mind, like Satellite by Dave Matthews, or this song December. Do you know that one by Collective Soul? Like that's how I learned picking. My brother plays really well, my younger brother. So that was also like a little bit of competitiveness in our house. Yeah. He's also a singer. I'm not. I actually, at my voice, I apologize. I wrote a song the other day that I was singing and it was very rocking. And now I don't know if you could tell my voice is really...
Oh, that's okay.
But my brother's a singer. So there was a lot of competition with us as well. We never collaborated well together. And as I was sort of, even though I was into like progressive rock and shredding, I was always, into the song and pop music and making it concise and thinking about it from an audience's perspective. My brother... bless his heart, was writing like 25-minute songs where there would be 18 minutes before a vocal came in. Yeah. And he was, really stuck to that. So, so it was definitely, like you were saying, coming up together and learning songs together. That was really exciting. And it, for sure, it was an exciting time.
When would you say was like the first band... Your first professional band?
I thought everything that I did was, I really did. I always thought wherever we're playing, it's Madison Square Garden. But I was really serious about my high school band. In my last year of university, of high school, I wrote a musical with a friend of mine that we put on at the school, and that was such a commitment. My sort of ended that era of my band. And then in university, I played bass in like a kind of funk band called Avenue Road.
Cool.
And we were like, gigging and people were dancing, and that was really exciting. And then I auditioned for Fifi Dobson. Do you remember her? Of course remember her.
Of course
She's
I
the
do,
best.
yeah.
She's still around. She's amazing. That was my first professional gig as like a hired gun.
How did
playing
you
with
make?
her? I was.
Oh, sorry. How did you make the transition from playing in a band and writing a musical, which is an incredible feat, and understandably you had a bit of a background in it because of your father.
Yeah.
The idea of going from that to being a hired gun musician for profession, was that a conscious effort, or did it kind of just happen?
It kind of just happened. It definitely just happened. I got a flyer completely randomly for an audition it was Fifi, but it was for a international recording artist. And in hindsight, it all makes sense because, they wanted Fifi. First of all, they couldn't afford like 30-year-old hired guns. And also because it's just in development, but they wanted a young band around her. And so they did an open call, and I just, randomly got the flyer. I had to learn a Linkin Park song and a Blink-182 song.
Awesome.
I auditioned. I was doing like kick flips and headbangs, and I, played it, well. I got the gig, and that just sort of took off. I mean, I was in university at the time, and I always planned to do a PhD in music. I stopped for Fifi. I ended up going back to school after, but that was really my lesson. Like when I started playing with Fifi, I had never worn in-ears before. I had never, been in a real studio. And with Fifi, we got to play like Jay Leno, Ellen DeGeneres. And the big turning point with her was she opened for Justin Timberlake's Justified tour.
Wow.
And on that tour, I became very close with a musical director named Kevin Antunes. Kevin he directs Madonna, but he's directed everything from New Kids, Britney, Backstreet Boys, you name it. And he really took me under his wing on that tour. And that's where I really made the connection of what my dad was doing and like arena concerts.
Right.
And he would show me on Pro Tools how he would add, zipper effects for the dancing. And, I just got to shadow him. And that's really where I knew that, okay, I want to be a musical director. And even more than that, like be part of a creative team, that decides, this song is going to start with just piano, but the piano will rise out of a fog in a trap door, not just a musical decision, but, that the whole creative decision. So it was really that tour. So I'm so grateful for that experience with Fifi. And it was my first time touring. So we did everything from like a van with a trailer to a tour bus. It was really exciting. I was like 19 or 20 years old at the time.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, with your education going for your PhD, what were you focusing on specifically?
I was all over the place. I did my undergrad in classical composition and analysis.
Okay.
And then I did my master's. I was focusing exclusively on Bob Dylan.
Wow.
And I was going to write my thesis on jam bands. Like what is a jam, like the genre of a jam band and sort of the history of that and how it came from, jazz improvisation. And I even went as far as going to Bonnaroo one year with a clipboard and interviewing people like, all these like dirty hippies.
Oh my God.
And I am, part metalhead, part hippie, interviewing them about like the musical characteristics. And then I went back to doing it on Bob Dylan, and I was really deep into it. And then, and still directing and working in Canada. And then I got, the Bieber gig, and then I never picked up schoolwork again, unfortunately. Wow. I would love to, but it's just been too busy.
Well, I do want to ask this. This is a total personal question. Because of COVID, I'm producing a classical radio show for CIUT just because I have the means. And now I'm, every week I have to listen to 90 minutes of classical music. Being in post-secondary, learning about classical music, does it ever apply, or do you ever take stuff away from that, applying it to pop music stage performance? It's such a different method, and it's hundreds of years old, but does those types of things ever come into play for you?
Definitely, and in a good way and a bad way. Sometimes I can't turn off my brain with harmony and analysis. And then sometimes I'll be in a session or in a rehearsal where something's not working, and, I could actually figure out harmonically immediately, like, Bach says this doesn't work, and this is why we're struggling right here. And if you move this note, and at the same time, if I want to get outside of the box and be dissonant, and create tension, so there's a release, I'm aware of specifically how to do it. But it really comes up the most when I'm doing like an award show or a TV show, and we get to add like a string quartet, and that's when I really get to apply that. And I love doing that. Especially, but no, for sure, it's like I said, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. I'm sure, like you and a lot of musicians listening to this, like, to go to a concert or listening to a song, I always try to listen to it as a 10-year-old playing air guitar, not a experienced musician who is thinking, oh, that's the 1 chord, that's the 4 chord.
Yeah.
And even when I do my job, I'm trying to think of it as, Jenny in the back row of the 300 level with an obstructed view, so sometimes, from my training, I have to turn that off for sure.
It's really, I find that to be really tricky, because you're like learning more and you want to practice all you're learning. But I always think about Adam Clayton and U2. That's my musical totem, is that somewhere in the world, Adam Clayton is just going in front of a stadium of people, and it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's something I get into a lot with drummers, is they, want to be, busy. And when they're playing in an arena, there's a reason why those Def Leppard fills work, whether you're Def Leppard or you're, Beyonce, like there's a reason why, too much is too much in the wrong place, unless you're like Carter Beauford and your drums are as loud as the vocal.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, definitely keeping it simple is important. That's no doubt.
It's funny you mentioned it. I'm on a Dave Matthews Band kick right now. And I can't get over Carter Beauford. Like every 5 years, I kind of go back and just do like the greatest hits. And you just listen to what he's doing. And it's like, I can't believe not only did he pull it off, but I can't believe he convinced everyone that this was the right thing to do. I want to meet him just to see like his character. I don't know if you've met him, but I would be curious to see how convincing a person he is. Or maybe he's just like that good, and he could just say like, listen, I'm gonna do me, and you guys all work around it.
It's true. He is so unbelievable. I mean, I love Dave Matthews Band, and like you, I was so deep into it years ago that now I'm just coming back to it.
Yeah.
When I snowboarded, I was like that. Like that's when I rediscovered it in a way, and I still go to the shows, and it's like you could just focus in on Carter and how busy. Like I could go to a show and just not listen to anything but a splash cymbal for the whole night, and just hear where they're placed and how it works, and how, like, I don't think it steps on the vocal, but maybe someone else would, but to me, it just works.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally. It's like if you took Carter Beauford and put him on like AC/DC, I would love to hear him play on another project.
It's really interesting. But my thing is that when I watch the videos and I'm listening to the band, as long as he's like chewing gum or like just has that like laid back disposition, I relax. I'm like, yeah, he could just do whatever he wants. It just works, But
Yeah.
It's amazing because there's always like those exceptions to the rule, which is not a lot of people get to exercise those moments, but it's always it's appreciative when someone gets to do something that's counterintuitive to what like the form should be for playing an arena or an amphitheater. So you got a call to, I guess, audition to perform with Justin Bieber, or how did that happen? And did you know what it was at the time that you were entering into?
No. At the time I was musical directing, and I had started performance coaching a lot of acts for Universal Music. So these are singers who need a musical director, but also have never performed on stage and needed like almost like a mentor boot camp person.
Gotcha.
You know, like they never carried a Marshall amp up 2 flights of stairs, let alone like held a microphone, you know, or spoken to an audience. So I was doing a lot of that with young kids. I was a camp counselor, so I think that's why
cool.
I work with a lot, and I really enjoy that. Like someone who's super green and eager to learn, and just doesn't have experience. And so Justin was, I mean, I'm so lucky that this happened. I mean, it could have been anywhere, but Justin at the time was playing acoustic on radio stations by himself. And his first live on TV performance happened to be on Much Music. So 2 nights before, Scooter Braun, his manager, was a little anxious about Justin playing and singing on TV, and also was a very big Dave Matthews, Tim Reynolds fan, and had the idea to hire, you know, a guitar player just to support Justin so he could focus on singing, you know, and in case, you know, this is, again, his first time performing on live TV. And for Justin, Much Music was a big deal. And he doesn't really get nervous, but I'm sure that was, you know, at the time that was as big as it gets for Justin and me, right? Much Music, like what I grew up on. And so, so they asked Universal to recommend somebody. And they just happened to be in Toronto. They could have been in LA or New York or anywhere. I mean, thank God this happened when they were already in Toronto. And I got a call from Universal, and I at the time I YouTubed his video. It was the video where he's like babysitting Usher's house. Right. And I thought, this is whack. Like, why is this kid babysitting Usher's house? But the more I watched, you know, I wasn't hip to like his previous YouTube videos, like people were, you know, that. And I went back and, you know, I saw him playing drums and singing. And I mean, there was no doubt he was talented. And so that night I went to the hotel to rehearse with him. And it was kind of not really an audition, although, you know, I think everyone was feeling me out. And it was cool. Like, he was living in Atlanta at the time and hadn't hung with a lot of Canadians. So immediately we talked about the hip, the Leafs. I'm a Sens fan. Tim Hortons.
That's okay, by the way.
Thank you. And we bonded over Canadian things. And then we started playing both songs. And I had done my homework. I think he was expecting to teach me the songs, but I had like put together this cool like open tuning, you know, arrangement of one time to play along with him. And so like right out the bat, I remember very well, like him look up at me and smile like that I was prepared. And then the next day, I mean, cut me off if I'm blabbing, because I know
not at all.
I don't want you to have a 3-hour show.
Ahead.
And I don't talk about this ever, you know, so it's funny to get asked about it. So the next day I went to Much Music, and there were like 10,000 kids lined up on the street. And I called my girlfriend at the time, like my now wife, like, get down here. This is insane. There's like 10,000 kids outside. And I brought 2 guitar stands and 2 tuner pedals with me, and cables and everything. And so at sound check, like I went to Justin's room, I grabbed his guitar, I put it on a stand, I used the tuner, like not just a tuner, but as a mute and everything.
Yeah.
You know, when he came out for sound check and he looked at me, he's like, oh, my mom usually just lays it on the floor. So, you know, I think I got the gig because I brought a guitar stand. And again, like that is the Canadian way, right? Like when I tour with Canadian projects, like I am putting out towels, ripping the label off water bottles. I know I've backed a trailer. I'm not bragging, but like this is what you do in Canada. Like the American acts that I've toured with, there's a much bigger team involved.
Right.
And everyone stays in their lane a little bit more. So of course I would bring a guitar stand and clean his guitar and tune it and all of that, and not put it on the floor at Much Music.
Yeah, of course.
And then that day I was like teaching him, we were jamming and I was showing him like a blues scale, and my wife came down, and my girlfriend at the time again, and she's like super rad. And so it just all became like good vibes. And the next thing he did was on the Today Show in the States, and they called me to fly down for it. And they never stopped calling me. And they, if this was in any other city in the world, he could have had a British guitar player or a local to LA, but they just, kept calling me. And, little by little, I started working with Justin on like, singing into the microphone, because he had only sung into a condenser at the time, really, how to sing on stage, how to, we did these little acoustic shows, sort of how to place the songs in the set. And we always did it very collaboratively. And as time went on, it was amazing because it became his vision. And I love that. I love when the singer is like, this is what I imagine. And I'm like, amazing. I'm going to make this happen for your vision. But early on, he was 15. So it was very collaborative. And then that's how I sort of, got into the role as his musical director officially, when he needed a full band and it wasn't just him and me playing acoustic.
It's to have to be a passenger in a car that continues to skyrocket upwards must have been a surreal experience, because he never, like after playing Much Music, like I remember when he had a MySpace page with all the local listings of the radio stations to call in to hear the song, and that changed very quickly, like very, very quickly.
It was a real rocket ship. And Justin, his manager, the general manager, a woman named Allison Kay, who's now very renowned, everyone from the label, we had like a small team of like 6 of us. Even my wife was part of that, because it was just, Scooter wanted it to be such a family, Justin's grandparents, and we were going from place to place. So it almost felt like summer camp in a way. And we were just part of this friendship, and it was like exploding. And we really enjoyed it. We not the explosion of it, but getting to go to all these cities in the world and eating food. And especially, I'm a foodie. That was the most exciting. And, Justin he had a tutor on the road. So, in lieu of sitting down and doing work, we would like go to museums all the time and be touristy. And, it was great, because I never want to just sit in my hotel room. There wasn't Netflix at the time, but it was really a crazy time. And especially like you were saying with the radio, radio stations weren't playing him, but he would tweet that he's going to be at this radio station, in Scotland at 2 p.m. and 20,000 people would show up outside, and the radio station would think like, oh my God, we got to start playing this. So it was fast, but it felt organic, and it felt like, especially Justin, he was putting in the work. He was, doing like 5 different cities in a day, radio stations, meeting all the fans, taking pictures with he worked really, really hard in that first year as it was exploding. So, and I think the movie, the documentary that he did really shows that, rather than him just the story that he like blew up immediately. He definitely went from playing in his bedroom to playing the Garden quickly.
Yeah.
But he worked really, really hard to get there.
Well, the documentary is fantastic. I remember watching it I went to a friend's wedding that was in the day, and then we were waiting for the reception. So we popped by my parents' place, and a friend of mine who's like into really esoteric stuff, but like trap stuff, like just harder stuff. He played in heavy metal bands growing up. And he was in the car with us and he was like, hey, we should watch the Justin Bieber documentary. And we kind of all like craned our necks back and we're like, really? He's like, we should really watch it. And it was incredible, but you know, you hear a story of this artist and you're following it in a peripheral way, that this Canadian 15-year-old is taking over the world. But to visualize it in that documentary was amazing, because you really got to see that not only is this happening to someone and this group, but they're also exceeding with it. Like this is an amazing show. This is a fantastic band. Like it really put into perspective what it is that's happening and if something is happening so well. And also this is a time where, like, you know, Drake wasn't Drake right now. We were all, I think, all looking for a Canadian artist to take over the world, and in a way that hadn't been done before. Because there's obviously big artists like Celine Dion and Bryan Adams, but with the Justin Bieber thing, this was very different because it came out of the internet. And
yes, you know, which I think is what one of the things that makes it most special is that he has such an incredible fan base, and those fans were, you know, like an army for him. And so they felt like an ownership over him. It wasn't like Disney or something saying, they were shoving it down their throat saying, listen to this is what's popular. The fans are the ones that made it popular, you know, by following him on social media and setting records, by going to these radio stations. And, you know, and then with Twitter explode. I mean, he's, you know, to have that direct relationship with his fans, they just felt such a ownership over him. And he, in a way, he was always an underdog to them. It was always a we, and we need to show the world that he's the real deal. We need to show the world that he really does play all these instruments and he's amazing. Yeah. And it just felt, we would play a new song in one city. The next day we would go to another city. This is when we were playing acoustic, and that song would have had like 3 million views, and everyone in the next town would sing all the words. And I've only ever seen that with like the Grateful Dead and tape trading, right?
Yeah.
So it really was like a, you know, lightning in a bottle with his fan. We know the relationship he has with his fans.
For you, coming from the idea of that you treated every gig like it was Madison Square Gardens, what was it like to then actually play Madison Square Gardens?
I mean, it was a dream. It was truly amazing. And what made it the most special was I was seeing Fish a lot at the time. I still do. I'm a super Fish head. You probably know, yeah. And so I have so many, you know, special experiences as a fan. You know, up to last year, being in the Garden, because Fish has played at the Garden. You know, a few years ago they played 13 nights in a row at the Garden. Yeah. You know, so to be in the audience, like with my hands over my head, looking up at the iconic roof, you know, so to play on stage and sort of scan the audience, it was such a full circle experience to be there. So yeah, it's you know, the world's greatest arena, and it's always really exciting. And it's bizarre to say always that I've done it more than once. Yeah.
With moving on from Justin Bieber, you've continued your career working with other artists, and obviously playing with such a high profile act has put you in contact with you're a guy in a sense. And if you have up and coming people,
everyone. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know, but in a sense, like, but also I'm sure that you would admit that, you know, if you're going to have an artist coming up, a Dan Kanter would be a good guy to have on your side, just based on the fact that, you know, you could play the instrument and you know you've done this before. Yeah. So you could do it again, or you can you can be another artist camp counselor in a sense.
Yeah, for sure. And after working with Justin for so long, and exclusively with him, when I got to do that with Ariana Grande or with Shawn Mendes, especially, like that's when I definitely felt like I knew whether I'm an expert or I put in my, 100,000 hours at that point. I definitely knew how to approach it. Every artist is different based on the artist, but it was really exciting to work, yeah, for sure, with Shawn, Ariana. I just finished. This pandemic is so brutal on so many levels, but just before it, I had put in like a lot of work with this awesome band called the Command Sisters, who are going to blow up, so just working with new acts, I love it so much. And it's exciting with young acts because I love the moment in rehearsal where they have sort of the revelation or the realization why something works, or they just, we're working on something and they get it, especially with like segues, speaking to the audience, performance moves on stage, where to extend a bridge, where to have a sing along, where to sneak in, like, you still with me, like all those little things. And they're, I'm not jaded. I am a super fanboy of music. And so it's great to work with emerging acts that are also not jaded, and it's not work for them. It's, being in a rehearsal with a singer like Shawn Mendes, who like never was in a room where there was a live drummer, in that first rehearsal when Mike Sleeth, I know they are mutual friend.
He's my Rush drummer.
Yeah, nice. I love him. In that first rehearsal when he hit the kick drum and the snare, and Shawn was like, what the fuck? Like he's never experienced that. And it's so exciting to be there for those moments. And I have 3 children, and not that like Shawn is like a son to me, but it's like, the experience of like taking my son on It's a Small World After All for the first time, and his eyes, and Shawn, playing with a full band. And, Ariana, when I started working with her, like she was like stopping the show in the middle, and she'd be like, 1 second. And then she would like, after a song, and she would like walk to the back, pick up a water bottle, like unscrew it, take a sip, put it down, and then walk back to the front in silence, and I would think, like, when did you see Michael Jackson? Like, I don't even know if Michael Jackson, it's like Jack Bauer never eats or goes to the bathroom, right? Like,
yeah.
And if you're drinking water and it's like a thing and you're like talking to the audience, like there's a moment for that. But with Ari to work into her show, like where the music or the lighting goes down and there's a musical interlude and she goes and gets water. And like for her, she's like, oh my gosh, and this is basic stuff, but it's really exciting, to see how excited they are about that kind of stuff.
But as you say, it's basic stuff. I do have to say that it takes influence to get artists to understand those types of things, because sometimes that's where they're allowed to allow their insecurity to be, taking a little too much time or not thinking about the audience. And I remember even playing a wedding once where the 2 guitar players, I didn't realize that they had never done wedding gigs before. And they finished the first song and they both looked down and started tuning at the same time. And there's just dead silence, and the whole wedding part, like the bride and groom are out, and they're just like, and I remember at that moment being like, oh my gosh, like they're performing right now for people that are going to remember this forever. I hope they don't remember this. And not everybody is as receptive to understanding the idea of a concert being no different than a musical performance or a musical, in the sense that you have a captive audience that you have to keep captivated. And it's not the easiest thing to remember when you're young, because you haven't filled out all of those thoughts and thought of yourself as an audience member watching a show.
Absolutely. I mean, there have been times with artists where I'll be side stage with a microphone in their in-ears just for the first few rehearsals or dress rehearsals, guiding them through, the show. I make them I write the set list on a giant whiteboard with all the notes and then embarrass them by having them face me and repeat, it. And just like a musical, my dad used to do this. We would, practice end of a song, transition, start of a song, stop. Next, everyone always knew. And to that extent, also, it's always important for me and for the artist's sanity to have have moments in the show that aren't scripted. With Bieber, the show had to be scripted because you've got trapdoors and explosions and dancing, but there were always moments where he played acoustic. When we would play acoustic, and we would not know what song we were going to play, and we would just have a list of 5 and randomly choose it. So and that was really healthy too, and that makes the show special for the audience, right? They're not. It's terrible to go to a show where the only unique thing about that show is the name of the city. I always like there to be spontaneity, but also structure. So for sure, I love dissecting and yeah.
Well, especially since you're a Fish fan, a Grateful Dead fan, and if you've followed them, I imagine that you've seen multiple shows. Those are great examples of acts that every time you see them is completely different, and that's why people can make pilgrimages to watch 10 shows in a summer or something like that, because it's always going to be different, and it's so wild because they have such a market for set lists from certain shows, and there's there's this whole this whole level of being a fan of something like that that's different, but it's kind of cool that you've taken elements of that and added it to something that in pop could perhaps be almost over scripted.
For sure. There's yes. Really well said. I am one of those people that make pilgrimages to every Fish show. And the way I can say that show in Atlanta in 2012 is where I heard this song. So it's nice with Bieber that I hope, we would play 2 nights in a city and one night we would play the song, acoustic Up. And I hope his fans are like, wow, that was the night that he played Up, and he didn't play it in any other city except here. There's this one Bieber song. If there's Bieber fans listening to this, there's a song called Thought of You on the album Believe. And he played it one time ever with me in Auckland. And it's the most banging song. It's literally one of my favorites. And Bieber fans, believers, I hate calling them fans, they're believers. They don't understand why this song has only been played this one time in Auckland. And it's not fair, but it's actually kind of cool that there's this mythology over the one time in Auckland he played Thought of You.
And that's the thing that's what I have always liked about music, that nerd stuff where you talk and you're like, did you know about this, that? And I feel there's less of it, but when you're able to see something that is a talking point with your friends, and it just increases the level that you can get into an artist.
It's almost like sports for me.
Yeah.
And just stats. I love stats about shows. And so set lists, for sure. And it's really cool that big bands like Metallica, Pearl Jam, Dave Matthews, there are big popular bands that are mixing up their set list. And John Mayer is now bringing what he's done with the Grateful Dead to his shows. I think he's playing 4 songs, in a 2 nights he'll only repeat 4 songs in 2 nights.
That's crazy.
He's doing an intermission now, which I think is a beautiful thing because it's flipping over the record and there's a new side, track 1, side B. And I think he mentioned to me, I don't know if he's going to do it, that he's even thinking of playing 2 nights in a city and calling it part 1 and part 2 to sort of educate that his audience that you go to both nights because it's like a story. You're missing the narrative if you only go to one night.
Yeah.
And so I hope more artists, especially who have the catalog to do it, have structure and but really, and a narrative to a show, but also make, each night unique in ways.
Well, I think it's really important, especially for like a John Mayer type who has a captivative audience. People know that if he's going to perform somewhere, people are going to come. And that's an extreme privilege to develop over time and to maintain it over time. But then to do something with it, I think is really interesting. And I like the idea of that, to really not know what you're going to see. Like, you're obviously going to hear hit songs. He has so many, but it also encourages, if you see the Toronto show, maybe you'll go to see him in Hamilton too, and really develop. Now, I've really enjoyed listening to interviews of John Mayer talking about this person. I also enjoyed this person's documentary, and I realized that you have played with them. What was it like working with Bob Weir?
Nice. It was amazing. Yeah, for sure. He's the oldest person I've ever jammed with, which is really cool to play with someone who has played guitar and been on stage for that long. I could feel that playing with him. It was, he's just great, and he's so experienced. And he's so Bob. Like, there was, one time, one of the times we played together, he called me a few days before, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to be in Toronto. Do you want to sit in on a few songs?" And he was like, make sure you know these 5 songs. Okay. So I learned them, and like, I really learned them. And I get to the gig, and we go up we're in the middle of the gig when I'm playing, and it's kind of loose and we're jamming. And then all of a sudden he segues into another song, and the whole audience cheers, and I cheer because I'm like, I love this song. And then I'm like, wait a second, this isn't one of the songs you told me to play, Bob. What the fuck? Like, we're in Toronto and you're throwing me under the bus.
Oh no.
And that's such a Bob. Like, I love that. I don't know if he did that intentionally or he's just jamming and feeling it, and it came to him that it had to go into the next song, even though it wasn't on the list. And I could, fake my way through it, fortunately, but just, that was such a great experience. Because for me, coming from a pop world, and he always gives me a hard time about it, that like to make me on the moment on stage play a song that he didn't tell me. I honestly think it was intentional. But he's just great, and it's a really awesome friendship. His wife is amazing, and his 2 daughters are incredible, and we're really close with them, my wife and I. And his wife has given my wife so much advice, over the years. And I'm rambling, but the first time that I went out with him for brunch, I was at Outside Lands in San Francisco, and I drove out to where he lives in the Bay Area, and we went for dim sum, and his 2 daughters and my wife talked about Jersey Shore the whole meal. And I was just sitting there. I'm like, come on, I want to talk about like Grateful Dead, and it was just, yeah. So, but it's really, really awesome. We have like a nice, like I said, friendship, and he's the man. And it's so great that they're still touring, and with John, who I worship, and it's like worlds colliding, and the vibe is, have you been to a Dead and Go show?
Not yet. But it's on my list now, because I've researched so much about it, and I think I didn't really understand the Grateful Dead at first, and I think over quarantine I've cracked the code in a sense. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm starting to appreciate it and understand it more than I did before.
It's really fun, and the vibe, to be in a place with that many people who just are appreciating the music. It's also beautiful now because you have so many generations there. It's like after the Queen movie came out, and I went to see Queen with Adam, and to see like a 7-year-old and that's so cool to be in a room with that many people. So the Dead shows are special that way. It's also super cool to be in a city, the day of a show, like Chicago, and we're just walking and shopping, and there, you pass 5 people in tie-dye shirts, and you're wearing a tie-dye shirt, and you're like,
see you at the concert. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like so awesome. It's like being, when you're at a away game to see your favorite team, and you see someone in that jersey, and you're like, or Canadian when you're traveling abroad.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a magical feeling. And I think that, the thing I really like, I find that attention spans are getting, tighter. People are having a hard time focusing. And I think that the fact that of the Grateful Dead, Bob Weir is also getting this spotlight on him now. And there's obviously a massive audience that are with this movement. I think it's a really beautiful thing because, as things keep getting quicker and quicker and quicker, and music continues to be discussing algorithms more than anything, I think it's amazing to have a Bob Weir playing a 3-hour show at, a baseball field or something like that, just making decisions, being artistic. And I think there should be more of it, but I'm glad that something like that continues to exist because I think it becomes more important each and every year.
I couldn't agree more. I know things are getting fast, talking about all about the song. There's no bridge. The bridge is gone in pop songs, and it's so upsetting that there's the second chorus and then there's the pre-chorus again, you know, and it's too bad about that.
I'm a bridge man. That was what I brought. That's what I brought to people. I was like, I got the bridge.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah.
But Dan, I really want to appreciate you. I really want to appreciate you coming on. This was a fantastic conversation. I
hope it's interesting. Thank you. Are we done? Is that it?
I think we're done. I could talk to you, honestly, I could talk to you all afternoon. And I'd love to have you on again, and we'll pick a subject and go at it. But
I would love that.
I got to ask you one question, because as much as I've been staring at you, I'm looking through these guitars in the background. Which one, if you had to take one guitar, which one would you go with?
If I had to take one, they're also, that's tough. The Zakk Wylde guitar is my dream guitar, and it was really cool to own it. But if I had to take one, it would be, I'm sitting on my meditation mat. I'm just on the floor. Look at that. This is just my J45.
Oh, nice.
And it's called Zimmy. And I would take this. This is my go-to workhorse road dog guitar.
That's awesome.
For acoustics. So that's a good question. I've never been asked that before.
I every now and then I've got a couple of guitars, and it's just if I had to take one, what would it be? If I had to bike it down, if I had to bike ride to the gig, what am I taking?
I love seeing someone with a guitar on their back bike riding to a gig.
I did that. I bike rode to Scarborough. My girlfriend had the car. We had stay-at-home orders, and I just totally spaced out. And I bike rode to about 45 minutes outside the city with my bass on my bag, my mono case, and I had all my pedals on it, and the wind was blowing at my face.
And the bass must have been, because it's high, right? It must have been pulling you back.
just pulling me. I'm wobbling as I'm
Yeah.
going. You got to watch those construction signs too, because you can clip the corner. That's happened to me. It's very embarrassing.
Yeah.
And I got all the way there, and then the door was locked, and all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, oh my God, it's a stay-at-home order. Like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
So I had to go back, but it's always good to know that you got a mainstay, a main squeeze. If things aren't working, you still got one guitar you could ride with.
No doubt. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Dan. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank Dan for being on the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or a suggestion for a guest you'd like to hear in a podcast episode, send us an email, allaboutthesongpodcast@gmail.com. You can check out this podcast on audio any way you can. It is everywhere podcasts are listened to, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you do listen. If you could rate and subscribe, that would be absolutely fantastic. If you are only listening to the audio of the episode, we are on YouTube. Check out the Sounds Like Songs Network. It's a fantastic podcast network that has all about the song, and also the sister podcast, Everything But the Song, hosted by Tal Weisman. We are putting out YouTube videos. We're doing more than just the podcast now. We're trying everything we can. It's been a fantastic experience going to video. A little challenging due to COVID, but we are finding our way, and it's been a fantastic journey thus far. When you do check us out on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification button so that you receive all the updates on the podcast that we're putting out. All About the Song is out every Tuesday. Everything About the Song every Thursday. So for Dan Kanter, I'm Michael Mactinell. Episode 120 is in the books. We'll see you next week.